Hello and welcome to Perfect Storm. This is Robert Kecseg, your host. We're back for another recording this week, and we're looking forward to having two different guests on this time. We're expecting to have a mayor in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Mayor of Irving, Beth Van Duyne, join us in a little bit. And we're going to talk about the recent U.S. Conference of Mayors event that took place in Dallas. If you remember last week, I mentioned that the Council of Mayors started in the 1930s during the Depression. It's, I guess, been going ever since, as far as I know. And it meets every year in Washington, D.C. for one meeting, and then it meets in another city around the country, and they rotate that second event. Well, that just took place in June in Dallas, and there were 34 Texas mayors in attendance. I believe there was perhaps a couple hundred mayors in all at the event. So we're going to talk with Beth Van Duyne, Mayor of Irving. I believe she just entered into her second term in office, and we're going to ask her what her thoughts were about that experience. I think it's a worthwhile thing to bring up. And then in the second half of the show, we're going to visit with Meryl Hope, who's a writer for Breitbart, Texas. If anyone has heard of Breitbart's website, it's a pretty big national website and part of the freedom movement. And if you remember, it was founded by Andrew Breitbart, who passed away kind of suddenly from a apparent heart condition. Meryl's been writing for quite some time. I had a good visit with her on the phone, and she is from Southern California, wrote for a number of different organizations and so forth there. Anyways, quite an experienced journalist. So we're going to talk to her about what she's experienced so far in Texas and probably try to relate it to this Conference of Mayors issue to try to loop that together. But I'm really looking forward to having both of them on. I think it'll be something a little bit different than what we've had. I've had mainly people on from a particular organization. And by the way, if you pass this information along, what we're doing on this show or the other shows that we have here, please pass it along to people through LoneStarTeaParty.us. That's where we're posting these audiovisual recordings each week. And Josh, what do we have? We have Bill Zedler, a state representative, has his show continuing, and of course Alice Linehan, who focuses on education in the state of Texas in particular. That's kind of her subject matter that she focuses on. And then
we have Frank Kachar, who does our Founders Constitution, which is dynamic. It is a weekly episode where, man, he gets in depth about the Constitution. So if you want to learn more about the Constitution, which is, especially as freedom folks, we need to be up on that.
So I thought I'd make a few comments about that, and I probably should try to do that every time because I call it my show The Perfect Storm because I'm kind of in the long lines of investments, and that's my business, and economics and how it applies to us. So I take my experience in the stock market, in investing, and how it affects businesses, and try to relate that to you in a hopefully succinct way. In past, we talked about the IRS, not in terms of the IRS scandal so much with targeting conservative groups, which has been plenty of press has been made of that. I'm trying to find subject matter that's something you may not have heard about. And try to give it shine a bigger light on it. And the one I found was that I'll mention again today a little bit is about a giant $4 billion annual fraud. So in case you haven't seen the show before, let me just give you a quick thing here. The IRS set this up in 1996 where they literally pass out a different kind of tax identification number. It's called the ITIN number. Stands for Individual Taxpayer Identification Number. This is for someone who can't get a Social Security number. It means that they're likely illegal. Many of them are here illegally. And the IRS has this burning desire to try to collect taxes from these people. And what ends up happening, they have been filing fraudulent returns with fraudulent information. And this is documented by the the U.S. Treasury Inspector General has put out a couple of reports on this and documented a $4.2 billion annual fraud. That's right. I mean, the IRS is sending out checks that their own personnel believe are fraudulent, that the Inspector General of the United States Treasury states is fraudulent, to the tune of $4.2 billion. All these millions and millions of checks going out. If you can imagine as a taxpayer how, what should we feel about our government in regard to that? It's beyond the pale. And Congressman Sam Johnson, I believe it is, up in Lamar County area, North Texas, he's been a congressman for quite some time. His office spoke with me about it, and they have a bill that they're trying to get passed. They've tried to pass it a few times. Of course, we know that a lot of things stop in the House of Representatives and doesn't get passed through the Senate because Harry Reid is the dictator over there and determines what bills come to the floor and which bills don't. And of course, this bill hasn't seen the light of day. So I'm going to continue to try to invite congressmen on the show to talk about it, either Sam Johnson or somebody else on the committee that he's on. This comes out of the Ways and Means Committee. My congressman in the Irving, Capel area, Carrollton area is also on the Ways and Means Committee, Kenny Marchand. So if anybody's listening or anybody wants to poke those guys and give them an elbow, say, here's a place that you can talk about this if you want to bring light to these kinds of things that are taking place. And that's why today we're going to spend a little bit more time talking with a couple of guests about this mayor's conference and what the federal government is trying to do to get the federal government get more hands-on in controlling our cities. And then I have one more new item that I'm doing some research on now, just for you to look forward to. I just got some information about a federal program called Operation Choke Point. Now listen to this one. This comes out of the Treasury Department. It is being it's a program to allow the government to decide if they don't like a business. They use the bank regulators, the FDIC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, to go to the bank who this business holds their checking account at, where they have their bank account. And they tell the bank, you need to close this account for this business. So they literally choke off the individual entrepreneur's business from having a bank account, because the regulator who's over the bank says, if you don't get rid of this particular account, they pick on these businesses. If you don't get rid of them, then we will bring the full force of our regulatory body onto the bank. So you have, I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to do more research on this and understand the origins and how this thing came about. And a little bit today, I did find that Congressman Issa has held oversight hearings about this Operation Choke Point. Go on YouTube, Operation Choke Point, and it'll come right up. They actually have the nerve, again, the United States federal government has the nerve to come up with a name called Choke Point to choke off businesses and deny them a bank account by putting pressure on their bank. And I think all the banks have participated in this. Like I said, it isn't something I've run across until recently, but we're going to have it on some future shows when I get all my ducks in order. I don't have a staff. I don't have a Glenn Beck staff of all these people researching for me to write books and put all this stuff together. But it's really, to me, just absolutely incredible as to where the tentacles of the federal government's going. Now, just think about if you were running for office or you were running for re-election and you don't bring up things like this, when you're just talking about, we need more jobs, we need more jobs. We need more jobs, yeah, but do we need a federal government sticking their nose in and obliterating businesses? And that's what the federal government has saw fit to do. And of course they're going to continue to do it if nobody talks about it. So here at Perfect Storm, these are the kind of things that I'm trying to find and bring to the forefront so that you can have a look at it for yourself and see what you think. And I am trying to do a diligent job of making sure that I'm giving you good information. And we'll get into some more of this when we have our guest call in. So check out Operation Choke Point. Check out IRS fraud, $4.2 billion on YouTube. You can find these stories on there. It'll pop right up. You'll get it immediately.
So, Bob, are they saying why they're going after these particular businesses? Is it just willy-nilly? Is it something like what we see with the IRS, if it's a political opponent?
Yeah, so far what I've learned is they're picking in particular on businesses that sell guns. They're picking on businesses that do payday loans, pawn shops. It's things, but what it is, it's things that they don't like. It's things that this philosophy of left-wing, radical, tyrannical government doesn't like, and they're just selecting them and picking on them. Some of these businesses, I believe, in the past had ceased doing a part of their business, so they thought they would be left alone. And I've just read some excerpts of this. I read an excerpt from one particular man that said, I'm out of business now. Please tell me where in the law did I do something wrong? If you can show me. There is no charges brought. There's no wrongdoing brought. There's nobody coming in and arresting anybody. They're just literally forcing these businesses to close because they're forcing the banks to take their account away. And I think they're in industries where they have to have an account, a bank account. They have to have certain kind of auditing power for the regulators to regulate them. So now they're just basically putting the kibosh on being able to have an account by having the bank just withdraw it.
Have you found out yet? Are they taking the money out? Is the bank holding the money, or are they at least
No, I
giving the
think,
money back?
as far as I know, they're just closing the account and closing off access.
But still, for a business, is what you just said. I mean, for a pawn shop, they have to have access.
Right.
Really, any business today.
Sure.
You have to have a checking account to do any kind of business.
And just to show you how thorough it is, this one business, they had a major bank, I think it was a Chase bank account, and then they had like a local smaller bank, and both of them at this simultaneously. So this is an organized effort to literally take people out of business. And remember, as I've mentioned to you in the past, listeners or viewers of this show, don't forget, it doesn't matter if it doesn't affect your business now. This is what happened to the Jewish people with the Germans. First it was the Jewish people. Then it was some other people. And there was a lot of other people that literally were destroyed, killed by the Nazis in World War II. It wasn't just Jewish people. That was kind of the excuse. But then it was, if you were a political enemy, you got thrown into the boxcar too, if you didn't abide by what they wanted. And what's going on here? There's nobody going in a boxcar, don't get me wrong. I'll make that perfectly clear. But you're taking political pressure and you're saying, we'll put our regulators on your bank because we're executing on a thing that the Treasury calls, I'm going to say it again, Operation Choke Point. I say, who comes up with this stuff? Who is so audacious to come up with a government program called Choke Point to choke businesses out of business, and then pretend that you're somehow for a free market economy and you're for people to be able to thrive and do business? This ought to be on the major networks, and they're never going to cover it. They're never going to discuss it. I was just pleased today with a little bit of time before I came on today to check and see that there is a Congressional Oversight Committee chaired by Representative Issa from California. That's ISSA, if you want to look up his name. That's one more thing that he's after. He's patrolling it. He's asking questions. And, under the excuse of, some people are selling pornography or whatever, they try to try to mix that in to say, look what kind of goody two-shoes stuff we're doing. But if these people aren't breaking the law, then if they're breaking the law, then they should be charged. They should be brought before a jury of their peers. They should have a fair time in court. They should be able to face their accuser. There is none of that. There is none of those constitutional rights being used here. They're just flat having their account pulled out from underneath them. So essentially their business is gone.
Well, this is like what Obama said about the coal industry. They can stay in business if they want to,
If you want to.
but he's going to make it where you're not going to make any money. He's going to use his elections have consequences.
Right.
He's going to use the full power of his office
Right.
to end something that he doesn't agree with.
Right.
And I think we see that here. I think we have somebody calling in here.
Oh, good.
Let's see.
Good.
Hello?
Hey, Bob, it's Beth and Duyne.
Hi, Beth. Welcome to the show.
I'm sorry, I cannot hear you. What?
I said welcome to the show. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it sounds like you're in a can.
Okay. Well, some people might consider this a can. I'm over.
Sounds like I'm on speakerphone. It's reverberating.
Okay. Hopefully the listeners can hear it all right. Okay. We just had our first guest call in. Beth Van Duyne is mayor of the city of Irving, and I believe she's in her second term. And
Yes.
I asked her to if she would come on and talk to us a little bit about the recent U.S. Conference of Mayors that took place in Dallas in June. And I've given the listeners a little bit of an idea of the history of it, and that they have, I guess, a meeting once a year in D.C. and then once in another city.
Correct.
And I guess there were 34 mayors in the state of Texas that attended this one. So give us your overall impression of it, Beth, just to kind of kick it off and let people hear from you.
Well, the reason why I participate, when I first became mayor back in 2011, I had been on the city council for 6 years prior to that, and I had participated in the National League of Cities. And the National League of Cities tends to be many council members coming together, and it's a huge conference. And you talk about what cities are doing for bond projects, what they're doing to influence the school districts and increase education opportunities. Talk about things that you can do to try to get more volunteers in your community. It's a great organization. What I heard about the U.S. Conference of Mayors was that it took that but pinpointed it, and it was a little bit more focused on specifically what the mayor's role in their communities could be. My first conference with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, I will admit, previous mayor of L.A., Villaraigosa, was the president. And the agenda was much more liberal than I was expecting. But that being said, they have the breakout sessions, which is what they usually promote. And while the breakout sessions tend to be more on the liberal Democrat side, you have to think about who's putting them together. If you even look at the state of Texas, arguably one of the most conservative states in the union, the majority of large cities have Democratic mayors. I mean, if you look at Houston, San Antonio, Austin, Corpus Christi, Laredo, Dallas, they are all Democrats who are their mayors, and therefore it's not outrageous to believe that the leadership of the U.S. Conference of Mayors tends to be more Democratic. It's just the case. I almost walked and didn't come back until a couple of mayors took me to the side and said, look, this is the U.S. Conference of Mayors. It is representative of mayors across the country. If we just stop going because we're Republicans and don't feel as if our voice is the one coming out, we're not doing anything to contribute. What do we think the conference would be like if all the Republican mayors pulled out?
Right.
And I kind of took that to heart. And what I did was one of the first leadership meetings that I attended, the first leadership meeting that I attended, and it was in January in D.C., I pulled that question and I said, look, if we are only talking to people like Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden, how can we expect any support from Republicans in getting our message across? And if we're only pushing Obama's agenda, how can we expect any kind of work and facilitation with the House right now?
Yeah.
And this was a year later, and Mayor Nutter out of Philadelphia was the new president. And he kind of took that suggestion, because there was a member of us there. I got to give snaps to Robert Cluck out of Arlington, because he absolutely backed everything that I was saying. Nutter went back and said they're going to create a bipartisan committee, and they did that. And what we found was the next conference, that a lot of the sessions were much more geared toward nonpartisan issues that mayors could wrap their arms around. And those included, from simple programs that we could support with, partnerships with our schools, to what we could do to create a website on our city website that got volunteer groups together. I mean, just kind of where the rubber hits the road kind of programs. That's something that I get a lot out of it. Now, when you look at the resolutions, I can tell you right now, if you're a Republican and you're going to this conference, the majority of the resolutions you just roll your eyes at, and you're like, I can't believe they're doing that. But it's probably no different than many council meetings that I've attended and I voted against. It doesn't mean I'm going to denounce the entire city just because I don't agree with some of the votes that our city council has made.
Yeah, what I was going to...
You know that more than most.
Yeah, and just to remind our listeners, we're speaking with Beth Van Duyne, mayor of the city of Irving, and we're talking about a recent June meeting of U.S. Conference of Mayors, where there were some 34 mayors across the state in attendance. And we're kind of talking about the pros and cons of it. Let me say this. The thing that was jaw-dropping to me when I first got the information in my hand was I actually was going to print off the resolutions and hit the print button. And
it was a book.
And after, 60 pages went by, I said, stop. How do I stop this printer? And I just was shocked. So I'm just going to pick out a few here that just so the listeners get an idea. And some of these I actually think I'm kind of humored by. One of them was, it says, ensuring veterans' access to quality health care. Now, I think, considering this was done in June, and the United States government, the federal government, has been hugely embarrassed, at the very least, to bring this up to mayors to ensure veterans' access, when the federal government has already been an abomination to the whole thing. I mean, it just shows me that, the purpose to me of local government is that people are closer to it, and you can have an impact. And Beth, about what happened in Irving with the school district, there was a pretty big change made in the school district. And of course, by your election, I believe, the first time around, that gave the city of Irving a chance to have a pretty decent change of direction. And of course, you still have all the other folks on the city council. And it's slowly, I think, changing more. But the point I'm trying to make is that local government can really be effective at the local level, and to have that any kind of involvement from the federal government, as lousy as they are of doing things, other than throwing money around. And that's the kind of concern I have is I think people should be concerned about the federal money coming to the cities, because there's always strings attached.
Exactly. I mean, we just passed a program last week. I voted against it, and a number of other members of my council voted against it, but the majority of the council members voted for it. Mm-hmm. And it was to accept HUD money to build a homeless shelter for teenage boys. Mm-hmm. And I say teenage boys, it was 17 to 21-year-old boys. Mm-hmm. And what that does, by the city requesting and accepting those funds, it commits the city to 20 years of overseeing how those funds are spent. Mm-hmm. And and I don't want to talk about anybody else on the council,
Right.
but I can speak personally.
Yes.
When I was 17, I had my own apartment and I worked 2 full-time jobs.
Yep.
I think if we look at, boys, 17, and by the way, at 18, they're men. 17 to 21-year-old men should be at the prime of their health and able to work. The
Sure.
city and the federal government should not be paying to provide, apartments for these kids,
Yeah.
for these men. Nobody did that for me when I was that age, and I think we don't look at it as if it's taxpayer money.
Yeah.
It is so easy to be able to say, oh, well, it's not city money. It's
Yeah.
federal money, as if that grows on trees, as
Right.
if, well, we're not going to be held accountable for that. And it is so easy just to see that money hanging out there and just take it. Oh, well, we're just accepting this grant because if we don't do it, another city will do it. So look what we can do here.
Yeah.
And you get enough cities doing that, it just becomes perpetual. And it creates the demand and it creates the need in D.C. so that they can defend collecting more local taxes
Mm-hmm.
to be able to feed the beast. And locally, we have to stop that.
Yeah, Beth, I'm glad you feel that way, and I feel like I have an idea of your philosophy is very similar to mine, and you know that I've spoken out at some of the meetings in the past and talked about this thing about this free money. It's just utter nonsense. I just want to make mention too of something else here.
Yeah.
If you just look at the schools and the amount of involvement since the 1970s, since the Department of Education began. It began with a relatively small amount of money. Now it's $65 billion a year. During the crisis year when Obama came in and they had all this extra money to throw around, they actually spent $90 billion. If anybody thinks today that the schools are any better off from all that money that's been thrown at the schools, and this is the thing that I would say, don't you believe that if the local school district in the city of Irving wanted to have some sort of a lunch program for very indigent people, that they could muster out a way to do that, but it would be in a much more efficient, small-scale way, as opposed to it's lunch, then it's breakfast. Now they want to get control of the kids before they start school, and in the early years. I read about one of the resolutions on page whatever page it was. It doesn't matter. But it was something about some
120.
Yeah, it was about some backpack program or some other baloney. And I just thought, from my point of view, the last thing I think we need is another federal program sticking their nose into what we're doing when they've already made a mess of things. I mean, it's just beyond belief.
Well, and this is where I think you see the real kind of division within a lot of the party, is that as a mayor and as local representatives, nobody knows our city in D.C. better than we do.
Right.
Nobody knows our city in Austin better than we do. And people find me. They know where I live. They know where my kids go to school. They see me in the grocery store. They see me in the library. I'm approachable. Anybody who wants my cell phone gets it.
Right.
I can represent because I know what my community needs. We complain that we want to keep all of those things local. We complain that we don't want to have unfunded mandates. We complain that we're sending too much of our money to D.C.
Yeah.
But then when you've got a majority that turns around and has their hand out,
Right.
well, give us the money, but then we don't want you to control us.
Yeah.
It's sending a mixed message. You can't do both. Either say no to the money, I'm going to stay, I'm going to stay independent and do as much stuff for our community as I can with what we've got, or you end up getting into, like what I was talking about before, this perpetual cycle. The more you ask, the more they demand. There was a school that was in Irving, and they wanted to build a gym. And they were potentially looking at, and it's a charter school, so it doesn't get those types of funds from the state at all. So it's a great school. They wanted to build a gym for their kids. They looked at having it as an emergency shelter. Now, the cost of building this gym was going to be $2 million, and they were going to have to do the fundraising through the parents to try to get this money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they went and they found out that they could apply for a grant to use it as an emergency shelter and get federal money to do it. So the city kind of got behind them. We were going to see what we could do. Do you know what they found out? that
What's
in
that?
order to comply with all of the requirements,
There you go.
it was going to cost $4.2 million.
Sure.
And the amount of the grant was $2 million.
Yep. I'll tell you. This is.
You tell me. What do you think they did?
Yeah. This is not a place to go for a solution. This is a place to go for more problems. And I was going to say, we were at that fundraiser for that congressman from Pennsylvania. And as you might have noticed, I came there prepared when I found out that he was chair of the Transportation Committee. And I brought up the simple thing of Amtrak and let him tell us. And he boldly told us how much money Amtrak loses every year. And you can't get rid of it, any of these lines, because each particular representative or senator in their particular state is only going to get too much political flack for getting rid of something that already exists. So we continue to lose whatever he said, $1.8 billion a year. And they want to actually bring us high-speed rail. I mean, I can't imagine, why you would go and say, well, let's just make the trains go faster, and then it'll be even better, and we'll waste even more money. But I was going to say, there was an article written by Texas Public Policy Foundation, Jess Fields, that I got a hold of. And here's one of the excerpts. And Beth, I would just encourage you and other like-minded mayors to speak to these people too, to get the word out about how you feel about it. The U.S. Conference of Mayors also explicitly called upon the federal government to mandate not only monitoring of private energy use, but also government-mandated changes in how these private entities use energy and how much. It's just an example of people observing, this organization and the kind of stuff that they're pushing. And of course, Beth, you know how I feel about property rights and the encroachment there. To me, I think it's really great that they have this. And I think the very point that you brought up in the beginning was getting together with other like-minded mayors to start to bring a voice that opposes this stuff. Get a point in the meeting where you have some say in the matter. As far as
it's kind of like Ted Cruz trying to get things passed in the Senate.
Sure,
it ain't going to happen right now.
No.
I mean, it's just, he can be as loud and as bold. What we're trying to do is, for example, Scott Smith, what happens is every year there's a new president elected.
Mm-hmm.
And to maintain a sense of fairness, how the conference acts as they look at the percentage. And for 2 years, there's a Democrat that is named as president. And every third year, there's a Republican that's named.
Oh.
Well, that's how they split it. That's how they do it. So for 2 years, for 1 year, it was Scott Smith who was the president. And Scott, as you may know, is a Republican out of Mesa, Arizona. He's running for governor of Arizona now.
Okay.
And Scott Smith was the president, but because Scott announced that he was running for governor, he had to step down.
Mm-hmm.
So Scott was only the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors for 6 months.
Oh, I see.
And while we had to wait 3 years, and then he was only there for 6 months. But while he was on the executive committee, we had a lot of discussion, as you might expect, on gun control issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Betsy Price, God love her, out of Fort Worth. She and I were attending, and we both looked and said, she is very proud to say she's a pistol packing mama, And coming from Fort Worth as a mayor, that's nothing that she is going to push on her residents, on her citizens there. And she and I were in complete agreement on that. But the conference, the majority of the conference attendees and the mayors were pushing that as an agenda item.
Yeah.
Well, Scott Smith recommended a resolution where we supported the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
Now, all of us as mayors take an oath when we assume the office. We all take an oath that we will all support the Constitution of the United States and of the state of Texas.
Yes.
So all of us in agreement that we are going to support the Second Amendment should have been a no-brainer. That should not have caused any controversy.
Yeah.
Because all of us as mayors have already taken that oath. You would be amazed at how much controversy that caused.
Yeah.
And the conversations surrounding that.
Well, and the other thing is that the basic principle is that those who are elected in the city of Irving and the various cities that are in attendance of this are there to represent the people of that city. And that's why it always upset me about other kind of federal programs and invasions, was because people are trying to tell us what to do in our city when they don't pay the taxes there. They don't own any property there. You have to be a property owner pretty much to pay taxes. And of course, there's the sales tax and so forth, I guess, that goes to the state.
There's sales tax, mixed beverage tax, gas tax,
Yeah.
you name it,
Yeah. And of course, it should be those people who are determining their own fate, and the people there should be accountable to it. The thing that gets me is it's always about money, though, because it's always about a lower level of government or a more local government getting money from somehow up above. And of course, I don't know how much is the cities involved in state trying to track state money. Is there state money?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm telling you right now, in the expansion 183,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's TxDOT. So we're looking, obviously, for funds to help us on transportation. And I don't know if I'm at odds with some of the far, far right from our party, but I think that there is a need for government.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are things that we do that nobody from the private sector wants to do or should do. And we need to concentrate on what government should do.
Mm-hmm.
And do it well.
Well,
transportation to me is one of those things.
Yeah, to me,
and that is one thing that we look to the state to help us provide. TxDOT building our highways. The city is involved as a partner in the right of ways and helping them figure out what businesses are going to go where and how we're going to cut through the city. But ultimately we are going down to Austin. I was just down there 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Requesting funds for that highway project.
Well, what I was going to say about how right or left you are, I really think the argument isn't so much about less government, it's really more about which government. Because if we have a city government, it's to cover certain things. If we have a county government, it's to cover those larger things. And when it comes to state government, larger things. So a federal government is really supposed to be quite limited as far as that goes. We're not going to go into that here.
Typically, people go to their city council and they don't know the difference.
Right.
They don't know what the county covers. They don't know what the state covers. People come to me complaining about some things going on in our schools, not realizing that the school board and the superintendent they're their own governing body. They collect taxes and they pay, property taxes for school taxes go in two different buckets. And I don't have access, I don't even have influence over how that money is spent. But typically when we have town hall meetings, we will have people come and ask us questions regarding the whole gamut, from federal, state, all of that. And it's our job, being closest to the citizens, to know the answers and where to go for that.
Yeah.
But they should be coming to us for those. The citizens should feel free to come to their local representatives for all of those questions to be answered. And the local officials should have conversations with their state and federal, and have relations with their state and federal representatives to be able to act as a liaison between, and also be able to influence where they can.
I was going to say, just to give you one thing to load into your gun in arguing with the people who want more federal involvement. Something I covered on the show before. I'll just give you a brief little point about it. The IRS created something called an ITIN number. Are you familiar with that?
No.
It's an individual taxpayer identification number. This is for people who can't get a Social Security number.
Social Security number, right?
Well, the Inspector General of the U.S. Treasury over the IRS has determined that $4.2 billion a year of fraudulent claims are being made for additional child care credits every year. This is a number from the Treasury IG. This isn't Bob Kecseg's number. This isn't Perfect Storm's number. That's his number, $4.2 billion a year. So that's how well the IRS is handling that. And actually, the only reason the IG was brought into this was because of a whistleblower IRS employee in Austin, Texas. Austin, Texas, by the way, is where all of these are processed nationally. All of these ITIN applications. And it's just a massive, massive fraud. And so I'm just saying as another example of a massive failure of big government. And all I'm trying to say is unless people like you who are in office at the local level, that's the reason why I'm doing the show that I call The Perfect Storm, to talk about economic issues and just the very thing we're talking about today, unless voices that have some sort of sense of reason and are in office speak out about it, I don't see us making a lot of progress.
No, and it's too easy to get caught up into it's their money versus our money, let's spend their money.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if it's federal money, it is still taxpayer money, and it's coming out of somebody's pocket. There was a great cartoon, and it was in the editorial section years ago, but it had some guy, up in his hand up in the air, throwing out money. It was actually the president throwing out money, and some guy going, "Oh, I've got to get me some of that." And his wife looks at him and says, "Honey, he's got your wallet."
Yeah.
And I love that cartoon because
Yeah.
you just don't think about it. There is no such thing as free money. There are no free programs. You're paying for it one way or the other. And you either have, you either are in the bucket paying for the money or you're outside. And we don't have nearly enough people pushing the cart that are in the cart. And we need to figure that out from a local representative side. But here's the thing, too. As citizens, we need your help. I can't tell you how many complaints I get just in my own city that we're not doing enough.
Right.
We have a business, we have a mall in the city, and we hear this complaint over and over again. Well, what is the city going to do about that mall?
Right.
What's the city going to do about it?
Right.
And my response has been on blogs, in town hall meetings, it is a privately owned retail center. Mm-hmm. Why are you not complaining to the owner to do something about it?
Sure.
What would you want the city to do? Or not? They meet the very minimums, but they meet minimum code requirements. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing really that we can enforce on them. We've met with them. We've had conversations letting them know that our residents are displeased. But legally, we are fairly bound. It's private property.
Right. Well,
but I hear that over and over, and the expectation is that your city government is somehow failing you because you don't have the businesses that doing what you want them to do. And again, people don't look at it as if it's taxpayer money, but it is the city's problem to solve.
Right.
And we as taxpayers, and I'm equally as guilty, we as taxpayers and citizens need to stop looking at the government and complaining about the government to fix everything.
Right. Well, that's why we're doing the show, and we have another show where Frank Kuchar, who ran for Congress against Joe Barton, he does a show about the Constitution. It's very educational. It's very informative. He's really, really good at explaining it. We have Alice Linehan, who does a show pretty much on education in the state of Texas, kind of fighting against more government intrusion there. And then we also have Bill Zedler has a show here that he does talking about state government issues. And I'm trying to do mine around local government, state government, that type of thing, because I just don't think I don't think we need another voice out there complaining about Obama or
yes.
And I was.
That ship has sailed. The date is coming. I mean,
I'll have to put her on hold. Mayor, I'm going to put
there's
you
a
on
lot
hold for just a
there's
second.
a lot that the federal government does.
Yeah.
Josh, I need this. This is where the rubber meets the road, right?
Right.
Hello? I said this is where, at the local level, this is where the rubber meets the road.
Absolutely.
And, we are at the point, at the local level, we all as representatives need to understand, and as citizens need to understand there's no such thing as free money. And
Beth,
when you take federal money, there are always something tied to it.
Always something tied to it. Beth, could you hold for just a minute, because there's another person calling in on the same line. If you could just hold for just a minute.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Meryl, is that you?
Meryl? Meryl, are you still there?
I think we may have lost.
Might have lost her. Okay, then jump back.
Okay. Okay, Beth, you're back on.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
there was another guest I was going to have on, but she's calling in really late. Anyway, I just wanted to say one other thing. You know, one of the things that I raised a long time ago was ICLEI and all of that. I'm still really concerned about the language, you know, this, because all of those things, the smart growth, the smart buildings, the smart meters, all that kind of stuff. Is there a big push, pressure on the city to comply with all the sustainability stuff? Is there still a big push for that?
You know, it's not so much for the city of Irving. We don't really get specifically pushed. I mean, COG is trying to work for development that takes into account things like water use, exhaust from cars and transportation. You know, we're pushing for bike lanes for no other reason than just to try to keep cars off the road, because when we start looking at our budget and our CIP program, realizing how much money we're spending on roads and road maintenance, it's ridiculous. So the city is not looking to get involved in ICLEI. We are looking at smart development, and when I say smart, it's not smart meters, but intelligent development that's based on some kind of long-term thought to how we're going to be able to maintain our roads, our sewer system, our water pipes. But no, I mean, it's not from any kind of federal guideline.
Yeah. What was that about the bike lanes that you mentioned? I didn't quite.
Oh, I said, for example, we're looking at putting bike lanes in the urban center, around Las Colinas, for no other reason than we're connecting it to our trail lines, just trying to promote and get use out of our trails, get people off the roads. When we look at if you've got that high of a density of people living and working in one community, it makes sense to have other available ways of transportation, including bikes.
Yep.
I'm looking at the potential for the Texas Stadium property, the redevelopment where Texas Stadium used to be,
Right.
at the Diamond Interchange. There's a possibility of putting bike lanes there. But to me, that's just, it's looking at it intelligently long term, what you best need to have in an area to promote growth and, retail areas and lack of traffic. That's a big thing for us,
What
as
about-
you know, living in the Metroplex. So I don't know if that's a sustainable or ICLEI prop, but I'm looking at it much more low level than that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the density thing. It seems like there was a big push on for density. I went to somebody from the staff person from the city, it was at least 3 years ago, and they were presenting about development, that Heritage District, and there was a big push about density. What is it about density that seems to be a popular topic?
What they're trying to do is in certain areas of the city, for Irving, for example, 70% of our housing options of our residential are rental units. We have way too many apartments. What we're trying to do is add a balance. I don't mind having apartments because I've lived in apartments. I know family members who have lived in apartments. I've got friends who currently live in apartments. It's a good alternative if you don't want to buy or don't want to maintain a single family home. I get that, but we need to have a balance in our city. And where I see apartments having a good planning project would be in an area like the urban center, or in areas where you are trying to have a high concentration of retail. And if you have a high concentration of retail, in order to get the retail there, you need to have high density residential around it. You look at West Village, you look at Mockingbird Station. I don't want to have a retail outlet in the middle of a single family home development.
Sure.
I don't think retail makes a whole lot of sense right in the middle of a school area.
Yeah.
How you plan, and I was a city and regional planning major for a couple of years in college, and you learn how to set plans up to keep when kids are getting picked up at 4 o'clock. You don't want it off of a shower traffic. So you put your schools over here, you put your retail establishments over here, you have your single family homes together. So when we look at where to put apartments, to me they should be in one central, a couple of central areas around the city.
Yeah.
And that will help feed the retail. But people who want to live in a quiet suburban neighborhood should be able to do that. And right now, I think we have so much mix everywhere. There's no rhyme nor reason to it.
Beth, I've got the other person calling in to be on the show. Can I excuse myself and we can continue this another time?
Absolutely. It was great being on, and I really do appreciate the opportunity.
You bet, Beth. And we've been speaking with Beth Van Duyne, Mayor of City. Thank you so much for your time. We will do this again.
Absolutely. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Meryl, are you there?
I'm here.
I just tried to gracefully move off onto another guest. Thanks for calling in.
It's my fault. It's my fault. I dialed the wrong number, but I had a tremendously lovely conversation with your wife.
Oh, great. So I want to, I don't know how much time we have left, but 10 minutes left. This is Meryl Hope. She writes for Breitbart, Texas, and I mentioned it earlier in the beginning of the show that you were going to be calling in, and we're really excited to have you, Meryl. I know you have a vast experience in journalism and writing from the past from our previous conversation. I was just talking with the mayor of Irving, Beth Van Duyne, and she is a fairly conservative person for today's day and time, and I think she's in her second term of mayor of Irving, and we were talking about the U.S. Council of U.S. Conference of Mayors. I always want to say Council, U.S. Conference of Mayors, and I was having fun with some of these crazy resolutions that they had. Did you focus on that at all in any of your write-ups, Meryl?
Not yet, because a lot of what I cover is education and also covering some crossover in terms of what's going on up here in Dallas ISD, I mean in Dallas in general, with what's going on with the immigration situation at this time. So I've spent a lot of time equally between school board meetings and covering Common Core, because that's the one thing that I cover a lot of, and courtrooms in downtown Dallas.
Right. How long has Breitbart had the Texas page roughly?
I think it was the end of January, the beginning of February when we launched here. Where we had a Texas bureau under the incredible leadership of our managing director, Brandon Darby.
Good. Well, Texas certainly has been a focal point nationally after we had the Wendy Davis filibuster, and now that we're in the news with all the immigration issues. It kind of amazed me that Arizona seemed to have all the talk about immigration as if they were the only border state. When you think of the size of the border with Texas, I was surprised we didn't have more national outcry about problems in Texas. But we sure have it now with all of these people coming over willy-nilly.
Well, I'm also very proud to work with some wonderful people now, like Brandon and Bob Price and Kristen Tate, and they have gone. These journalists have gone to the front lines, and as many people know, Brandon broke the news to a nation, to the world. That was his work. So when I feel so proud, of just the danger they put themselves in to get the real story, to get the truth. It just makes me feel wonderful that I work with such great people.
I was going to say, do you think from your point of view or from your organization's point of view, do you think that the people that work down there in the Border Patrol, do you think that there are a lot of very frustrated people there, that it's difficult for them to know really what their job is?
You know what? I'm not the right person to ask that question. If you want to talk about education and what is going on in this state, that's a great question for Brandon or for Bob. But I can't answer that question. I can only tell you what I know because just the other night, Brandon actually spoke in Northeast Tarrant Tea Party, and he did have two border agents with him, and he had one of our other writers, Ildefonso with him, and they were all talking about this very issue. So I can only tell you secondhand.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't
then.
know
Okay.
from
Then.
my experience covering it, or reading their wonderful stories.
Okay. Well, I'm speaking with Meryl Hope from Breitbart. We're going to switch gears then and talk about education a little bit. We don't have. We got about 5 minutes left or so, which will give us a couple of items to talk about. Of course, we had our state legislature and our governor never accepted Common Core, and then we ended up with something called C-Scope, which I think was kind of a backdoor way of getting it in. Could you just kind of tell us where you think it stands now?
Well, we're in an interesting place because the same people involved with the creation of C-Scope are all friends, or are the same people involved with the Common Core.
Mm-hmm.
And there are tremendous parallels and relationships, believe it or not, with a lot of think tankers in the University of Texas and the University of California, Santa Cruz, and Cal State University, Northridge. And a lot of this stuff just doesn't happen. People speak with one another over the years because it's an educational mindset of how they train the teachers in the first place. Where we're at now is a disconcerting place because technically there is no Common Core in Texas. HB 462 said no, but it didn't have any teeth in the legislation, which I believe they're hoping to put in once after the election, which will definitely come from the Dan Patrick side. I believe that's where we'll look to do it. He becomes lieutenant governor, and there's a lot of us saying you need to do that. And I know from my conversations, I understand he wants to do that because I think what was very disappointing was when you ban something and you learn people don't honor an honor system. And people just went and did what they wanted because that's how educratic reform mindset is. They don't necessarily follow the rules. So what you have in Texas is you have C-Scope repackaged and rebranded as Cheek's resource system, which is a supplemental program, but it's still there. And you have Common Core seeping in to the education because a lot of the education in Texas on the college and career readiness front, because of HB 5, is aligned to all the same tests and measures as the Common Core. And then on top of that happy layer, you have the No Child Left Behind waiver. And the waiver is deceiving because people think that means they always talk about flexibility. The flexibility only means that you don't have to be responsible for having every child be able to read and write it 100% at 14 years old, or whatever the crazy guideline that they had put regarding that is. So we have a stew that's brewing, and it's not a good stew.
Right.
And I think there's many well-meaning politicians, and I think there's a lot of politicians that are not well-meaning. And this fight has come down to the people. And as someone who came down from California, where they are a good couple of years ahead of you, and all of us here in terms of what you don't want your education to be, I say it all the time. You want to be California?
Sure.
Keep looking the other way.
Meryl, let me ask you this then. We had some really good changes in our legislature in the March election in the Republican primary. I think we made some pretty good strides there in the House and in the Senate. So if you were to be informative to those brand new people who are stepping into office to go to work for us in Austin, in regard to these bills, could you just give us a quick down and dirty explanation of what they should be looking for, what these new reps should be looking for in these bills?
HB 462 needs teeth, so that there's a penalty. That's something that was added on the Republican convention, state convention. They talked about putting that in. That needs to happen because now if you're implementing Common Core, and they're not calling it Common Core, it's such a confused picture because there's 21st century learning, there's college and career readiness, there's all these different components that still add up to a federally led mandate.
Mm-hmm.
That affects. So we need to start understanding that one word does not cover everything. Common Core, it may not be in Texas, but all the pieces of it are. So
wow.
If we start putting in actual precautions that have punitive damage, like you get no funding for your schools, you might feel the pain a little. Things like that need to happen. People need to understand what is also bad and good, because people get hysterical. I mean, just because you're doing a project or something is a project base doesn't mean that's the problem. It's what you're doing in the project. So everything gets headed under these huge terms, and everyone either gets alarmist or they go, "Oh, you're being an alarmist." We have to sit down and understand what's going on in the classroom, and the most important thing is parents have to start paying attention.
Yeah. So you think the HB 462 bill needs teeth, and the things that were discussed at the Republican convention to address that, you think were some fairly good remedies?
I think that's a great place to start, putting the teeth in. I think HB 5, we have to sit back, and I've written about these articles. I've written these bills. I've written about 462. I've written about 5. I've written about the No Child Left Behind waiver. But there's another component that also has weakened the State Board of Education, and that was SB 6. Mm-hmm. Everything's online now.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the biggest problems is, and this is another little rabbit hole in the whole mix, is we all get stuck in one area. Oh, the advanced placement, U.S. history. Oh, my God, what are they doing there? Oh, the content of this. The truth is we have to look at it also from the perspective of it's not just what they're doing, and if the content is compromised or biased, are we losing our freedoms and liberties in the process? As I've said to you before, off the air, in schools today, there are many schools that are involved in consortia down here, as well as in other parts of the country, in Common Core states, where to be able to get a grant, a federal grant, you have to have your mayor sign off. Well, that's one step removed from the old days of your school board,
mm-hmm.
your publicly elected school board. On the other hand, everyone talks about the publicly elected school board as the golden, solution to everything. Well, I covered an awful lot of Tea Party people who couldn't get elected. So we have to look at things realistically with our eyes open. Not 100% bad, not 100% good, but we have to find the truth. And
right.
We have to work towards that middle in that truth to be able to affect the change, so that because we still, in theory, control those politicians. We elect them. Absolutely.
We've been speaking with Meryl Hope from Breitbart, Texas, and I want all of our listeners to know they can tell their friends about the show, go to LoneStarTeaParty.us, and go and visit Breitbart, Texas, because they have devoted a whole page now to covering issues in our state, because I think it's that important. And so I think it's the kind of thing that we want to have people on, like Meryl, who are working hard every day to keep us informed, and we want to use this relationship to kind of cross-pollinate things that they're working on, so that we can make you aware of it. So we want to get more people to go to that site from Texas and become aware of it. Meryl, we kind of ran out of time here today. We're going to certainly have you back if you're willing. And we can get into a little bit longer discussion on it. I tried to squeeze too much into an hour, and then we got a little bit confused on the number or whatever. But Meryl, thanks for being on. We're going to have you back soon. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Well, thanks for watching Perfect Storm. We had Mayor of Irving on talking about the Conference of Mayors, and now we had on Meryl Hope, a journalist with Breitbart, Texas, which is covering our state. Like I said, they devoted a whole page on their website to Texas. So please go there and see that, and spread the word and tell people about Perfect Storm and the kind of shows we're bringing you on LoneStarTeaParty.us. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.